YouTube as well. I usually go live at midnight most nights, so this is early for me. So thanks for joining early. Heart of the show will be around midnight as usual. 1 o'clock will really get stuff going. Yeah, usually as like Jackson ends up live, I usually grab two or three people more, and we have our best discussion around 1 a.m. But I'm never gonna wait for just everybody. I love having any conversations. Let's get stoned into some discussing politics. That's the whole point of it. We'll rant, we'll chill, we'll do whatever it takes. Debate, that's fine too. Um, but yeah, I do have some fantastic White House coverage today because that is just Jen Psaki is you know one of our favorites here.
Okay, on my first day back, I'm delivering Jared Bernstein to all of you, who we're thrilled to have to give some brief remarks on the economic news today and answer some questions. And
Cheers.
then we will do a briefing as long as we can before the president departs. With that, I will turn it over to Jared.
Thank you so much, Jen. Today's jobs report provides yet another indicator that, as the president said this morning, quote, our economy has gone from being on the mend to being on the move. In the first conversation I had with the president when he was a candidate, he explained his view that we faced a dual health and economic crisis, and that we could not attack one without attacking both. That intervention became the American Rescue Plan, and the historically strong labor market we see in today's jobs report is a testament to not just the
We
president's
gotta speed
correct
this up, right?
diagnosis and
This
prescriptions,
guy's
but his
fucking
insistence that
painful.
the plan be quickly and efficiently implemented to get COVID and economic relief, shots in arms, and checks
All right,
in
I'll mute
pockets
myself for a
into the
minute.
system. Today we learned that we've got an unemployment rate of 3.6%, a tick above its pre-pandemic rate of 3.5. We've got an historically unprecedented run with data back to 1939 of 11 months in a row with job gains north of 400,000, yielding an also unprecedented 7.9 million jobs since President Biden took office. We have, in one of the most welcome trends we at CEA,
As long as you can stay before you need to gather, and we'll keep you updated. They're going to track it closely from here.
He's boring. Let's not do
I
him.
just have a couple of quick updates for you from the top.
Cheers, Jen
One
Psaki.
is in the State of the Union, the president called on out the ocean shipping carriers who raised their prices by as much as 1,000% during the pandemic. These costs pass through to American businesses and families and contribute to inflation. And just a month after the president spoke about this at the State of the Union, the Senate yesterday passed overwhelmingly bipartisan legislation to reform the ocean shipping industry and lower costs for American farmers, businesses, and consumers. And additionally, this week, the Department of Justice announced that it successfully stopped a merger between two companies that make the cranes that move shipping containers on and off of ships at our nation's ports. The merger would have harmed American consumers by reducing competition in the supply chain and would have put our global supply chain at risk. And so these steps obviously are positive steps forward. I also wanted to note that today the Department of Homeland Health and Human Services and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services made important announcements in response to the Vice President's call to action to improve health outcomes. Beginning today, as many as 720,000 pregnant and postpartum people across the United States could be guaranteed Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program coverage for a full 12 months after pregnancy, thanks to the American Rescue Plan. Finally, for the week ahead to next week, I had one more thing after this. On Monday, the president will deliver remarks on progress made on his administration's trucking action plan to strengthen our nation's supply chains. On Tuesday, he will deliver remarks celebrating the success of the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid and extending affordable health insurance to millions of Americans. And on Wednesday, the president will address thousands of national, state, and local building trades leaders from across the country at the North America's Building Trade Unions Legislative Conference. Finally, as you know, the United States is delivering a significant amount of security assistance to Ukraine every day. Over the past few weeks, we have delivered more than $350 million of security assistance to Ukraine, which the Pentagon has described as an unprecedented pace. And we welcome the UK's donor conference yesterday and its announcement that allies and partners will provide coastal defense systems, which is something that President Zelensky has asked for and is something that President Biden discussed extensively with allies at NATO last week. More than 30 nations have now sent security assistance to Ukraine, thanks in part to the leadership of the President and our diplomacy. So we're going to get to as many people as possible. Darlene, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Jen. Welcome back.
Thank you.
One question on Russia and two quickly on two other subjects. Russia says that an apparent attack by Ukraine on one of its fuel depots is making it harder for Russia to stay engaged in the talks to end the war. And I was wondering what the White House thinks of this suggestion from Russia that Ukraine's actions are the ones that are potentially standing in the way of peace over there.
Well, we have seen those reports. We're not in a position to comment on the Kremlin statements. I would note Ukraine has not made any statements or confirmation of these reports. I would also note that this is a war that President Putin started, a brutal war with Russia's forces continuing to bombard cities across Ukraine and commit terrible acts of violence. We've seen the people of Ukraine fight valiantly in the face of unprovoked Russian brutality, but there is one aggressor here, and that is President Putin and the Russian military at his direction.
Second, on Title 42, the announcement that it's going to be lifted on May 23rd. Can you talk a little bit about why the restrictions aren't lifted sooner than May 23rd, perhaps even immediately? People who want to come to the country to seek asylum will now have to wait 7 weeks to do so when the CDC says that restriction is no longer necessary.
Absolutely. Well, it has always been the case and continues to be the case that this is a health directive determined by the CDC. So let me start there. But I would also say that implementation of their decision requires an interagency process, specifically leadership of the Department of Homeland Security. I would note the statement that was put out by Secretary Mayorkas, and it requires the implementation of appropriate COVID-19 mitigation protocols, also scaling up capacity and scaling up resources needed. And so it was always going to be important to have an implementation period, and the timeline reflects that.
Question is there any comment on the vote in Staten Island by Amazon workers to unionize?
Sure.
Amazon to do that?
Well, the president was glad to see workers ensure their voices are heard with respect to important workplace decisions. He believes firmly that every worker in every state must have a free and fair choice to join a union and the right to bargain collectively with their employer. The Amazon workers in Staten Island made their choice to organize a grassroots union and bargain for better jobs and a better life. Go ahead, Emily.
Just in light of the fuel depot fire in Russia, what is the U.S.'s general position on potential future attacks by Ukraine on Russian soil? Does the U.S. believe that it is up to the Ukrainians to decide whether such potential attacks are justified, or does it generally believe that those kinds of attacks should be discouraged because they would be seen as being escalatory?
Sure. Given we have not confirmed or commented specifically on the reports from here, and neither has Ukraine, I'm not going to get into a future hypothetical. What I would just reiterate again is that this is a war of aggression by the Russian leadership, by President Putin, that has left millions of people displaced, homeless, has targeted civilians, hospitals, and other innocent people across Ukraine. We know who the aggressor is. That is President Putin and Russia. And beyond that, I don't have any comment on military tactics.
The president said yesterday that Vladimir Putin appears to be self-isolating, that he appears to have maybe fired or put under house arrest certain advisors. Does the U.S. have a clearer sense of which advisors are currently advising Putin and who has his ear?
Well, the president was speaking yesterday to public reporting, so we don't have more details to speak to at this point in time. But I would say to go back to a couple of days ago and the information that was put out by the administration that was reflected, that came through our intelligence agencies, what we do know is that this war is not going how President Putin had planned, that his intention of winning a quick war, defeating the Ukrainians quickly is not how it has played out. We have seen troops be demoralized. We have seen troops run out of equipment that they need on the Russian side, and that is clearly not what he had planned. In terms of who is advising him, I don't have more specifics on that front from here.
And just one more on a separate topic. You're obviously not the only person in the administration recently to test positive for COVID. Can you give us a sense of whether there have been discussions lately at the White House about what would happen if President Biden were to test positive for COVID? Help us understand what working from home, quarantining, running the country would look like if the president were to get COVID.
Well, I would first say that this wasn't exactly your question, but let me reiterate this point, is that we take steps over and beyond CDC recommendations and guidelines here. I would note that while I tested positive about 12 days ago, if my math is correct, I waited to return to the office until I had a negative test, and that is our protocol here, or the protocol I was held to. Also, we take steps in advance of meeting the president. Anyone who's meeting the president is going to have a test that day, and we also take social distancing steps in meetings when warranted. In terms of, look, we recognize that COVID-19 remains a transmissible disease, especially recent variants. And while I'm not going to get into a future hypothetical of any of our additional principles, since the second gentleman had testing positive, I would note that the President of the United States can work from anywhere, can run the country from anywhere, and we have the capacity to not only prepare for that, but to support anything that is needed. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. Just a quick follow-up on the Staten Island vote.
Sure.
It's obviously a big moment for the labor movement in this country, the first union at Amazon. Has the president had a chance to speak to labor leaders, or is he planning to issue a statement? Is he planning to talk about it at all?
I don't have anything planned to preview for you in terms of an official statement. I'm speaking, of course, on his behalf. Obviously, as you know, the president has been a longtime supporter of the right to organize, the right for workers to organize and plan for better jobs and a better life, and certainly
He was part of Congress that gutted those rights in the 80s and 90s, so that's bullshit. That's complete bullshit. Maybe on paper he said it, but he has voted to gut those. And this, by the way, is my delicious vegan keto cookie. If you want to check it out, it's on my YouTube channel. I have vegan recipes on there. And this is my vegan keto made from shatter. That was the rest of the shatter right here. About 30 milligrams THC in these wonderful bad boys. Gluten-free, keto, vegan, all the right things with THC in it. So good. So fucking good. I actually added a bunch of peanut butter powder to this one to thicken it up. Very good idea on my end. Well done, Todd.
my comments reflect that. Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up, just comments from a senior Treasury official this morning that said sort of the sanctions that have been imposed by the U.S. and its allies on Russia is sort of pushing Russia to become a closed economy. That is obviously presuming that China and others are not sort of making some of the materials that they get from the West available to them. Has the administration noted any sort of change in stance when it comes to China, and Russia, or is it, is there any evidence that they're providing perhaps military economic support?
Our assessment has not changed since our national security advisor spoke to this. What I would point out for you too, as well, is the strong statements that came from European leaders, given their meeting on exactly this topic today, which certainly we share the sentiment. Go ahead.
Lots of urgent issues discussed here, but with the helicopter approaching, one little bit of housekeeping. Is it true that you are leaving the White House to work for MSNBC?
Well, you can't get rid of me yet, Ed. I have nothing to confirm about my length of public service or planned service or anything about consideration about next plans. I'm very happy to be standing with all of you here today after it felt like a never-ending, endless time in my basement, quarantining away from my family. Believe it or not, I missed you all a lot. And my focus every day continues to be speaking on behalf of the president, answering your questions, as tough as they may be at many times, as difficult as they may be to answer at many times. And I hope that I meet my own bar of treating everybody with fairness and being equitable.
And just because this has been raised by our colleagues, by people who are observing this process, is it ethical for you to continue conducting this job while negotiating with a media outlet?
Well, I have always gone over and above the stringent ethical and legal requirements of the Biden administration, and I take that very seriously. And as a standard for every employee of the White House, I have received rigorous ethics counseling, including as it relates to any future employment. I've complied with all ethics requirements and gone beyond and taken steps to recuse myself from decisions as appropriate. And so I hope that all of you, I've been working with all of you some time, would judge me for my record and how I treat all of you, both in the briefing room and otherwise. And I try to answer questions from everybody across the board. I know everybody in the back of the room may not always be pleased with me, but I try my best, and I will certainly continue to do that. Okay, go ahead.
Are you good?
Yes,
Follow?
go ahead, Chris.
Jen, given the reports, which have now been confirmed by multiple media outlets, how can you continue to be an effective briefer if you do in fact have plans to join a media outlet?
What a bunch
Well,
of
I have
assholes.
nothing,
I
again, to
love
announce
it.
about any conversations or any future plans. And at whatever time I leave the White House, I can promise you the first thing I'm going to do is sleep and spend time with my 3- and 6-year-olds, who
She's so
are my
mad.
most
I love
important
it.
audiences of all. But I would say, Kristen, that again, I have taken the ethics, legal requirements to the highest, very seriously. In any discussions and any considerations about any future employment, just as any White House official would, and I have taken steps beyond that to ensure there's no conflict.
And I understand what you're saying, but I guess the question is, how is it ethical to have these conversations
Jesus.
with media outlets while you continue to have a job standing behind that podium?
Well, there are a range of stringent ethical and legal requirements that are imposed on everybody in this administration and many administrations past about any conversations you're having with future employers. That is true of any industry you're working in, and I have abided by those and tried to take steps to go beyond that as well.
And broadly speaking, is it the policy of this White House to allow staffers to have discussions, even if
Wow.
indirectly with institutions that impact
Told you this was a good one.
their jobs and your job here?
Well, it is the policy of this White House to ensure that anyone who is having conversations
Oh,
about
I
future
told you this was a
employment
good one.
does so through consultation with the White House counsel's office and ensuring they abide by any ethics and legal requirements. And those are conversations that I have taken very seriously and abided by every component of. Oh, okay. So when we go to Serena, we can go, and then we can wrap.
Thank you, Jen. Can you
said you missed
reports
us.
that the U.S.
I did. Okay. I know, it may be that people who may have to see the president depart, and I don't want to hold anyone back, but I also am happy to answer your question and a couple of others if people want to stay, but if people need to, are they gathering right now? Sorry to interrupt your train of thought here. Okay, go ahead.
Can you confirm reports that the U.S. has been providing Ukraine with protective equipment such as gas masks, hazmat suits, and other materials against a possible chemical weapons attack from Russia?
So the United States and members of the international community have, of course, repeatedly warned about the potential for Russia to use chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine, and that Moscow is possibly planning a false flag operation. In an effort to assist our Ukrainian partners, the U.S. government is providing the government of Ukraine with life-saving equipment and supplies that could be deployed in the event of Russian use of a chemical and biological weapon against Ukraine. It does not compromise our domestic preparedness in any way, shape, or form, just for everybody's awareness, but we are providing it as we are providing a range of materials and equipment.
One quick question on another subject. The House passed a bill today that would remove marijuana from the federal schedule of controlled substances. Every Democrat, save for two, voted in favor of this bill. Does the president support the legislation?
Well, first let me say that, as the president said during the campaign, our current marijuana laws are not working. He agrees that we need to rethink our approach, including to address the racial disparities and
It's the weakest fucking answer.
inequities in our criminal justice system, broaden
so
research
fucking
on the
weak.
effects of marijuana, and support the safe use of marijuana for medical purposes. We look forward to working with Congress to
Weak.
achieve our shared goals, and we'll continue having discussions with them about this objective. Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you, Jen.
Oh, okay, we gotta wrap up in a second here, and then I'll go to Karen. Okay, so there, you guys gotta wrap. Yeah. I'm sure we will get you let us get you a thorough comment on that. I will say, as the president conveyed in his announcement yesterday, certainly working with the global community to ensure we are meeting the supply shortages in the global community at this time is part of our effort to reduce gas prices for Americans, given it's a global oil market. So as part of that, and we will get you a more comprehensive. I'm here and in my office. If you guys have good questions.
Question on inflation.
Sure.
Real quick. Today, the president blamed Putin's invasion of Ukraine for not just higher gas prices, but also higher food prices. Inflation was at 7.4% in January before the invasion. In February, it went up to 7.9%. Putin didn't invade until the 24th. So March is really going to show the impact of the invasion. And that report doesn't even come out until April 12th. So how are people supposed to believe the Putin price hike is to blame for food prices going up when the timeline doesn't add up?
Well, here's what the president is reflecting on. One, the price of gas has gone up by approximately $1 or more since Putin started lining up troops at the border. This is something that outside economists have spoken to as well, not just the administration. And those are just factual details about how much the price of gas has gone up. We know that's a huge impact. And when you say inflation, people think the cost on their pocketbook and the impact on their budgets. The second piece on the availability of food, we know that different markets around the world are impacted by the lack of production in Ukraine and other because of the war, and we know that that could impact global food prices.
It hasn't happened yet. This is the first time we've heard the president blame Putin for higher food prices.
We learned last night that Haiti relies on Ukraine for their wheat. That's
A
rough.
lot of areas that are leading
Haiti's right
to,
next to us.
price increases on people's pocketbooks, and where we could see it increasing over the course of time. I'm here in my office. I see you all.
Who will replace you?
Who will replace you? Who's coming up next? That was a good question. Who will replace you? After that fun antagonistic bit. There we go.
So I am sure that many of you have heard by now that I am officially leaving the podium. I assure you it was 1,000% coincidental that I tested positive for COVID this past week and gave a couple other people an opportunity to do dress rehearsals to fill my shoes. Not that that's possible, but I will be moving on to another outlet, MSNBC, and I promise this has nothing to do with the Biden administration or my abilities to represent them. It's just time that I move on, so I hope you can too.
Damn. That was pretty good stuff. Pretty good stuff there. Good comedy coming from Rachel Maria. So check her out, please, because she's been doing some pretty good mocking. She does a lot of political AOC, the whole crew, really. She does the whole crew. Good stuff. Yeah, the White House learns today that she's moving on, probably, eh? It's good stuff. I want to check out Chris Hedges and Lee Camp talking on censorship. Both of them were taken off of Redacted tonight. Both of them have been redacted from, your DirecTV cable watchers. Those who watch that still. Of course, I watched him on YouTube or Rumble. or Rockfin or something else, because that's how I would try to watch them anyway. But this is on YouTube, so it's legit. It's not. I don't have to get censored on this. But we're talking about censorship. That's the conversation at the moment. So yeah, these guys have both been heavily censored.
Hey folks, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Please take a second to click the thumbs up, click the subscribe, share it, all that good stuff. I'm also live on Rockfin. I have an incredible guest for you today, which I'm very excited about. Let's see if I can get Rockfin going here.
Get Rockfin going.
I mean, you all know him and his tremendous work. So many best-selling, amazing books that have been pivotal in my life. Also, his interview show on Contact that ran for several years. All of that shut down recently, which we'll get into. But yeah, it doesn't need much more introduction than that. Please welcome Chris Hedges.
Hey, nicely.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Strange times, but perhaps not unexpected.
Very fun name. Very fun.
No,
name.
it's not unexpected. I think all of us who've been following it have watched this steady progression of marginalization, demonization, and censorship. I was very vocal in opposing the deplatforming of Trump for this very reason. You don't want to give these large tech monopolies, which are completely opaque. We know nothing about them. They know everything about us. The power of wholesale censorship, because they're hardly going to stop with Alex Jones or Trump. And I didn't expect to be a victim quite so quickly. But
Right.
I had already been hit with their shadow banning, as you have, and algorithms. That's not conjecture, by the way. Of course, it's all, it's not public. But that last year, I was at Truthdig before we were all fired for trying to form a union and stop the publisher from firing Bob Scheer. I do have a very bad habit of sort of clashing with one institution after another. The IT people did a
He got taken off of
a study of referrals by impressions.
Washington Post,
Which,
New
so
York
you type,
Times. Which one was he
imperialism into
part of?
Google, and if I'd written something on it, it'll come up with anything else that was recent. And referrals from impressions declined from over 700,000 to below 200,000. So that was already going on. The whole prop or not, propaganda or not, this anonymous website that attacked left-wing sites.
Well, and the brilliance of shadow banning is that it because you often can't point to it and say it's been done, even though it's obvious.
Right.
I went from gaining 5,000 subscribers on Facebook a day to gaining 0.
Even me being little and small and little, after about a month of streaming on YouTube, I was up to like 100 views a day. Like the first 12 hours, my videos would get 100 views, and then you check on them 48 hours later, and they go from 100 down to like 62, 65, and now I'm getting like 15. And I have friends who are subscribed to me who don't get their notification. They don't have any clue that I'm doing anything. And these are personal friends who like see me posting this on like Snapchat and stuff, and they still don't see me on. They still can't find my fucking links. Like I have to send it to them via text every day. So if you talk about anything at all, anything real at all, they censor you.
Okay, for 5 years. The New York Times recently, after RT closed, and they wrote an article about it, said Lee Camp, with his numbers flagging, believed he was shadow banned. So,
Well, yes. Well, isn't that classic? I worked there for 15 years. I know how it works.
yeah, yeah. Well, so you do have a longer history than I of getting kind of purged or forced out of these institutions for your speech, for the things you're saying. I mean, you were kind of forced out of the New York Times despite winning a Pulitzer Prize after you started speaking out against the Iraq invasion, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then RT America, for I think everyone watching probably already knows, but shut down in the span of a day. And I don't exactly know the reasons, but it seems pretty evident it was connected to U.S. sanctions. And on top of that, all of our past episodes banned globally. So years of episodes. You wrote
After I played the Rachel Maria clip there, the freaking thing suggested I got hairy legs, and just adjusting it made it go into my freaking head. So thank you so much. Freaking thank you so much, universe. Just smacking me right in the face with that, huh? Now it's gonna be stuck in my head for about 10 minutes.
great article on what was lost. I mean, this is kind of the digital version of burning of books.
Yeah, it's kind of like Stalinist airbrushing. Trotsky's in the photo and then he isn't. That's how totalitarian societies work. You exist and then suddenly you don't. Look, I mean, with my show, it was this one, you know it. It was this wonky show where I read books and interviewed the authors. It was not one show on Russia. In fact, the few times that Russia was mentioned, or Putin, was not flattering. Matt Taibbi wrote a nice piece about it and linked to a show with Alan Nairn. He was kind of pretty rough on Russia. So, but that's not the point. That's not why they shut it down. I mean, we know from the Director of National Intelligence report in 2017 why they targeted and eventually shut down RT. It had zero to do with Russian propaganda. It had to do with the fact that RT was giving a voice to, these are their words, Occupy activists, anti-fracking activists, Black Lives Matter activists, third-party candidates. That's why
Yeah, that and anti-war voices, anti-capitalist voices. They're giving, the people who are not mainstream media appropriate. RT gave voice to those who are not mainstream media appropriate. Both of these two being perfect examples.
And so they marginalize you. I mean, this is how it works. They marginalize you, they force you into a particular space, and then they demonize that space. So, for instance, I covered the revolutions in Eastern Europe. I was in the Magic Lantern Theater in Prague every night with Václav Havel. The only way you could hear Havel was on Voice of America. Then, of course, that allowed the communist government to paint him as a stooge of the West. Or you go back and look at Bob Scheer. He runs the great Post website, Scheer Post. I write a column there every Monday. And he ran Ramparts. Well, they blocked the advertising from Ramparts. A very funny story about Bob taking a Pan Am Airlines ad off the back of Time magazine or something and putting it on the back of Ramparts so he could show it to potential advertisers and give himself some respectability. And of course, what happened was Pan Am sued him to take it off. But that's always the case. And so, especially in my case, if you're a strong supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, if you're a sharp critic, as I have long been, of the Democratic Party, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. And look, I would have been pushed out of RT. I wrote a very strong column denouncing the invasion of Ukraine as preemptive, a criminal act of aggression. Preemptive war is under post-Nuremberg laws, an act of. I don't think I would have been able to stay. It went dark 6 days later, but I can't imagine that Moscow would have looked very kindly on that very vocal condemnation of the war. It didn't happen. And so that's conjecture.
Of course not.
But the walls are really closing in. I go all the way back. I started as a reporter covering the wars in Central America in the 1980s.
But just real quick, I know you're saying they would have not looked favorably on it, but through my entire time there, as you said, you had some harsh anti-Putin stuff earlier. I was never censored. I was never told what to say.
Yeah, no, I wasn't either.
I think this.
That was one of the things Ed Schultz said as well, is that he was never censored. That's why he went to RT, and that's why when he left MSNBC, it was the only place for him to go. It's completely, and Ed Schultz is the epitome of a fantastic journalist in my lifetime.
Same was true for you. So it is true they might not have liked that, but.
Well, Moscow definitely wouldn't have liked it. I mean, whether they would have swallowed it, I don't know. That's conjecture, but they definitely wouldn't have liked it. But I certainly, when I made that statement, was aware that I was potentially antagonizing RT. But I can't denounce preemptive war in Iraq and then not denounce preemptive war in Ukraine. With this caveat, as I said, I was in Eastern Europe in 1989 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it was universal understanding that expanding NATO, of course, we all thought NATO had been rendered obsolete, which shows you how naive we are, it would not be expanded beyond the borders of a unified Germany because it was an unnecessary provocation. In fact, Gorbachev wanted to work out a mutual security alliance, and everyone, even, the venal Henry Kissinger said that NATO should not be expanded. But it was $1 billion arms bonanza for refitting Soviet bloc militaries with NATO compatible equipment. They use different caliber. I learned that in Sarajevo. They have like 61 mortars. We have 60s, this kind of stuff. So, and that's what drove it. And we talk about Ukraine not joining NATO. Well, that's really kind of shadowy because Ukraine is a de facto NATO country. It's awash in NATO weapons, had 150 NATO military advisors. Of course, Biden just admitted that we're training Ukrainian troops in Poland. So this doesn't excuse what Russia did, but it was completely predictable. And there was a column I wrote a couple of weeks ago where I quoted a 2008 WikiLeaks cable that had been leaked, written out of Moscow that predicted precisely what would happen, including the fact that Ukraine would be the flashpoint. So it was all understood, but it was, I really think, done for profit and perhaps this assertion of U.S. global hegemony. But it was very foolish. It was unnecessary. I don't think that Russia would have invaded the Ukraine if we had honored our promise not to expand NATO. And under the Clinton administration, of course, we promised that we would not station NATO troops in Eastern Europe, another broken agreement.
Right.
Yeah, and it seemed evident that the U.S. is losing a grasp on our hegemony, and there a lot of things showing that the petrodollar is being dropped in some instances. The trade with China is now of nations is now far larger than trade with the U.S. We're kind of just losing our economic stranglehold on the world, and so I think a lot of that plays into what's going on right now. But like you said, like you mentioned, the Ukraine. I want to play this real 1 minute clip.
Saudi Arabia.
This is your colleagues, journalists, but these are the ones that are allowed in the White House press corps room. And this is a clip of them all demanding that the White House basically arm Ukraine more and push us closer to nuclear war.
Than what Ukrainian officials are saying they need the most. It sounds like, we're pretty dug in on our position when it comes to the no-fly zone, when it comes to the MiGs, despite this growing bipartisan call in Congress to shift a little bit. So to put it bluntly, is Zelensky wasting his time tomorrow asking for these things?
President Zelensky is going to be speaking to Congress tomorrow. He's been pushing for fighter jets, a no-fly zone. We have to hear some of those same requests tomorrow as well. Has the administration shifted on that at all?
Calling for a no-fly zone. They're a NATO member. They share a border with Russia. How do we view their calls for a no-fly zone?
And on President Zelensky's address tomorrow, of course, he is expected to ask for more assistance, as my colleague noted. A lot of the U.S. positions on that haven't changed, as you just said, when it comes to the no-fly zone. But on the aircraft specifically, the Pentagon said last week that Secretary Austin said they do not support the transport of fighter aircraft at this time. Is that?
But the end of the show today.
You get the point. That they are just endlessly pressuring the administration to have a no-fly
I think this is
zone,
one of the best segments I've seen. You can tell me if they missed something, but
from my point of view.
Well,
the end of the show is going to be this here with Emma Bingland, Vanessa Beeley.
Even the Biden administration doesn't want to go to war. But in terms of weapons, sure. The idea is to turn it into Chechnya.
Alex
or turn it into
Thompson,
the old Afghanistan,
and then
the
Last American Vagabond.
Really
and this was an hour and a half long history of Ukraine that was just amazing. In-depth detail of Russia-Ukrainian tensions, history, everything. It was really good. And that's I'm going to be doing that towards the end because
to defense that will make Germany the third largest military in the world after China and the United States.
And
it's just insanity.
Do you want to have the discussion?
And by shutting down Russian media, of course, you're not going to hear the Russian position. The fact is, Russia has many legitimate grievances, including, I would argue, a demand that Ukraine remain neutral, given Russia's history, especially after the fact of
check that out. I'm always looking for new
Nazi
things to check
invasion
out.
in World War II, which devastated the country, and a century before that, Napoleon did the same thing. So they don't look at NATO. Nobody in the Middle East looks at NATO as a defensive force. Go try saying that in Afghanistan or Iraq. It's an aggressive.
I won't check it out live, but I'll check that
and
out.
It's been aggressive in Eastern Europe.
We'll be on the Ukraine-Russia history second half of the show today. That's the whole second half.
Romania and in Poland.
A couple really good journalists
we almost had a nuclear
and a
showdown
former
over Soviet missiles in Cuba, which are 90
miles
miles from the coast of Florida. It's just the inability to see the world from the perspective of the other, and of course, what's even worse is we can't acknowledge the legitimacy of these viewpoints. I mean, this gets into the whole collapse of foreign reporting, which is what I did. A good foreign reporter is culturally, linguistically, historically, religiously literate. You understand, you explain how another society sees you the way they do, why they see you the way they do, and you give their voice. But of course, all of that's been eradicated for the kind of cheap nationalist cant that defines the Ukraine crisis and frankly defined the whole war in Iraq. We forget how lonely it was for those of us who stood up to defy that war.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak, since you've been in wars, you've reported from wars, you've seen it firsthand. I was wondering if you could speak to the power of the far right nationalist, very violent groups that pop up. Obviously, we've seen that in Ukraine since, I mean, even before, but definitely since the 2014 U.S.-backed Maidan coup. These Nazi forces that apparently mainstream media in America is now telling us to support them. Can you
Yeah,
speak
I'll check it out.
to
And
their influence and their power by
I
even
do
by
every Monday. I usually try to
with the
do
collapse
at
of the Soviet
least
Union,
one
there
new
was a
channel that I have
resurrection of
never
these
watched
fascist forces.
before.
I lived in
So
Zagreb,
if
in
I can
Croatia,
find something that
which
won't get
openly embraced the
completely
Ustasha, the
throttled
fascist
by
giant state under
the
Nazis, but I
algorithm, I
also
will show it
covered
on Monday.
Romania, for instance, and
So that's
the
my
old Iron
Monday show.
Guard
I always do
couldn't
somebody
resurrect itself fast
who I've
enough
never
after the fall of
heard
Ceausescu.
of.
In fact, I
It's my
interviewed the
my
head
big
of the
name
party. They renamed
reaction.
themselves the Peasant Party, I believe. If I remember
Usually
correctly.
right
And this
wingers,
guy had been an
but
officer of
historians is
Stalingrad. I can't
fantastic.
make this stuff up.
That
He
makes
came
me
into
way
the
more
office
excited
wearing a long
than
black
just
leather
taking
coat.
on people I've never seen
So
before.
yes, there was immediately after the fall,
Politically.
because if
So
you go
I
back
love
and look at the history
I'll be checking them out
in Eastern Europe, Stalin was quite
tomorrow,
ruthless
and maybe
against
setting something up for
nationalist
Monday.
movements. Unlike Lenin, there was a difference there. And these nationalist movements were suppressed in places like the Ukraine, so that with the advent of World War II, these nationalist movements gravitated quite seamlessly into the arms of the fascists. And there was huge collaboration, especially with the Ukrainians. I don't remember the exact percentage, but a large percentage of them were camp guards. They joined SS battalions. And then you see, with the fall of communism, a resurgence. I have not been to the Ukraine, but it's my understanding that these old fascist forces have their own cemeteries, and most of the Jews that they killed are still lying in unmarked mass graves, or they might have, a small memorial or something at Babi Yar. I don't know. But so yes, that resurgence of fascism is real. You have a significant part of the population that looks back on that fascist era with admiration and respect. And of course, we have fascist parties and fascist militias in the Ukraine. I'm not saying every Ukrainian's a fascist, but it's there. It's real.
Yeah, yeah. I believe Scott Ritter's point was that they may not make up that larger percentage of even the Ukrainian military, but they are so aggressively violent that they are the ones that lead the way.
I ran down that rabbit hole early into my
do anything that's
documentary
going to
days.
alienate or offend
That is
the
a
Nazi,
very
contingent
fun
in the military.
rabbit hole to fun down.
I also wanted to
down.
talk about how this.
But yeah,
war
I've binged those
that obviously
documentaries.
Russia started in the sense of actively bombing.
But I'll check out the channel
and
for sure,
invading.
just because
But
I'm
it
always
serves
looking for
as
new
a
channels
beautiful
to check out.
distraction for
New angles.
Biden administration, Congress in general, in terms of what's going on here domestically. I mean, while this goes on, there is zero discussion of our ridiculous and awful prison state. There's There's zero discussion of climate change. It's so many things that are just completely ignored during a time of wall-to-wall coverage of whether it's this or the invasion of Iraq or whatever.
Well, sure. Well, the Biden administration has been a disaster. It hasn't even managed to fulfill its most basic campaign promises of $15 minimum wage or forgiving student loans. Its Build Back Better bill is gutted and destroyed. All of the support that actually came out of the Trump administration, the $2,000 checks, the moratoriums on foreclosures and bank repossessions, the child tax credits, supplementing unemployment, which is running out now, all of that is being lifted. So things are getting worse economically. There's a refusal, I would argue, on the part of the Democratic Party, because of course they're beholden to corporate power to push through the kinds of reforms and establish the kinds of programs that would ameliorate the very real suffering, which of course only fuels the proto-fascist or Christian fascists and the cult-like Republican Party. But remember that it's a unified Democratic and old Republican Party establishment that is now working together against this kind of right-wing populism, if we want to use that term. So Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney, they're all basically bonded now with the Democratic Party, Krystal and all these other figures. And it very much reminds me of 1932 in Germany, where there's a great fear by the aristocratic class of the Nazis, with legitimate fear. And so von Papen comes into power, and all he does is try to recreate the ancien regime without passing through the radical social legislation that might have been able to stave off fascism. In fact, because of the crash, they owed international banks so much money, they canceled unemployment insurance. Jesus. And that's a very similar kind of phenomenon. So they're not dealing with the structural issues that have created these political distortions. What they're doing is trying to silence people like you and me who point it out. And that is not going to play out well. I mean, I think even the Democratic Party leadership understands they're going to get shellacked in the midterms. And if we keep going like this, we're going to end up with Trump or a Trump wannabe, with this difference.
Kanye West or DeSantis. I don't want to deal with DeSantis, man. He is anti-free speech all the way. I live here in Florida. I don't want to see DeSantis on the ticket. It's so gross.
these people are going to come back with a campaign of unmitigated vengeance. It's going to be a very ugly period in American history.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I want to let people know where you continue to do your work, because even on my live streams, people keep asking where they can find.
I should, for a meme, you should make a throwaway account to just troll heavily in that new Twitter clone Trump made. I don't want to deal anything with Trump. I don't want to deal with anything about Trump. I don't have enough brain cells to waste. It's a battle I know some people that want to get into. I know some people that want to get into that battle, but that's not a rabbit hole I want to go down. I have some rabbit holes I'd love to go down. History junkie, there's books around me that I want to read. I'll read them in like 5 days once I pick them up, but I'm just waiting to pick them up. But yeah, I don't want to go down a Trump Twitter hole. No, thank you. That was 2016 me, not 2022. I've learned my battles. I've given myself anxiety attacks over that one a few too many times. I'll pick my battles in a different way nowadays.
Well, I did what my friends Glenn Greenwald and Matt Taibbi did. I went to Substack.
Not enough anxiety.
If I get enough subscribers, then I will continue to write my weekly column for SheerPost. Bob doesn't have any.
And I like history. Other people in the house are history buffs galore. Other people and my friends around here are huge history buffs. So this might be a channel that I watch but turn 5 people onto. So thanks. That was a good call. You found a history junkie. So cheers to that.
Money runs that thing out of a Social Security check, and then we'll reconstitute my television show. So that's the goal. So it's chrishedges.substack.com.
Yeah, Chris Hedges.
chrishedges.substack.com. Thank you so much, Chris. I hope to talk to you again in not too long.
Great. Thanks for doing it, Lee.
Thank you. All right, there is Chris Hedges, the always amazing Chris Hedges. If you haven't read his books, you must do that immediately, because they are so incredible, and they will shift your entire view of American empire at minimum. That's the minimum you'll get from his excellent work. So yeah, support him on Substack. My stuff is at patreon.com/Lee Camp.
All right, yeah. So Lee Camp and Chris Hedges both have been censored from so much of their past stuff deleted, so much stuff censored and taken down, and so now they're rebuilding, they're restructuring, and they need help. So yeah, give them a throw as well. Give them a follow, like, whatever you can do. I wanted to talk about this cringe as fuck video. Oh, it's so bad. I heard about the situation, of course, because
very strange type of new real life video.
God damn, I don't want to hear his voice already. I heard about this situation, and I heard about the Twitter battle. I saw about 5 or 6 people talk about the Twitter battle. But if you're going to talk about the Twitter battle, why not get it from this right here? Like, this is just so... Oh, man. All right, I had to watch this. All right, I have to watch this. I watched about a minute of it originally, and I stopped it, or like 2 minutes maybe, and I stopped, and I kind of was like, Argh! And then I was like, okay, we got to do this live. Jesus, dude.
I'm sitting here with Krystal. Hi, guys. So I was going to do a separate segment on this, but I didn't have the time to like sit down and do one of those videos where you see the screen capture and I'm talking, and we're just super busy. So you're just going to have to settle for the real life stuff here. But ooh, look at that. Was that an eagle? Or a hawk? What was that? Anyway.
I think it was a hawk.
Squirrel?
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Squirrel.
It looked like a pterodactyl was flying.
Squirrel.
Anyway, so let me walk everybody through this. Yesterday was the Amazon labor union election. And there's a lot of things that are interesting about it, because Christian Smalls is the one who really ran it. He's the one who's been organizing behind the scenes. Christian Smalls, of course, used to work at Amazon, and he's the guy who blew the whistle about the lack of COVID protections and all that stuff.
He's the guy you both should have had on your fucking channels already, but you didn't platform him properly. And if you did have him on your channels, it was like for tiny segments instead of you should have like platformed this guy a long time ago. But anyway, let's continue.
And originally, I think they were trying to get with an official union that already exists to organize Amazon, but that really didn't work out. There's a bunch of issues with that. I mean, some of those unions, the leadership of those unions are kind of corrupt, and he decided, let's try to do this the independent way. So he's been organizing behind the scenes, and look, truth be told, I had no idea whether or not what he was doing was working. In fact, I was skeptical. I was thinking it probably wasn't going to work. Well, long story short, the election happened yesterday, and it's actually still ongoing now. At least they're counting the votes now. It looks like the Amazon labor union is going to win. It looks like they're actually going to unionize in Staten Island, which is amazing. It's an incredible victory for the labor movement. It's honestly an indictment of like the big official labor unions that already exist, because it wasn't them who got this. It was Christian having worked at this Amazon facility and then meeting people, learning about them, becoming friendly with them. My suspicion is that what happened was a lot of the people who work in that factory, on top of having personal relationships with him, they realized that Amazon was just smearing him when all those articles were being run about how, you know, what they say about him, Krystal? He's inarticulate.
So Amazon's general counsel said he was, quote, not smart or articulate, and they floated a PR strategy of actively making him the face of the Amazon union movement, thinking that would doom it. Right. I mean, think about that. So they're like actively wanting him to be the face because they so wildly misunderestimated.
Thank you.
Underestimated him.
Did I say that one time?
Yeah, you did.
Nice. Yeah, so look, it was all because he was blowing the whistle on Amazon for their lack of COVID protections. You know, Jordan Charitable has done reporting on the ground on this, where he talks about there was all these Amazon factories. Forget just the drivers having to piss.
Oh, I do not love these two.
Trucks. You also
Jesus.
have the factories have a lack of climate.
It's just a fucking cringe response to the situation is what this is. But I don't like these two, so like I've respected them for a minute at one point, right? Like, I don't know. I guess if you're on the left, you've probably respected at least one of them. I respect Krystal more because she got fired from MSNBC, and she went down for, being anti-Hillary, saying Hillary was a bad candidate in 2015. She said Hillary was a horrible candidate, and she got fired. But she had already had like a $5 million deal, and she was already in like the third year of it, and they had to give her like $2 million buyout. So she was already like a mega million. She already had more than $10 million to her name. So she could get fired and not have a problem. So that's respectable for getting fired. At the same time, who needs more than $10 fucking million in your life, really?
Control sometimes where it could be too hot or too cold, people are passing out, people are throwing up, there was no PPE, all these problems. So it looks like he's going to win. Now, we had Christian Smalls on Crystal Kyle and Friends, and you also had him on Breaking Points how many times?
A lot. We've been talking to Christian for years, ever since he first got fired from Amazon.
Here's the reason why we did that.
Tiny segments.
Because we fucking care, and we want them to actually win, and we want them to get their union. And
Tiny
nobody
segments.
cares more about this than Krystal. Krystal was following this election with a hawk's eye yesterday. I mean, how many times did you reach out to me in the day telling me like an update?
It was like Status Quo was the first one to talk to him, and then Jimmy Dore talked to him the most. And at least of the original 6 months, Jimmy Dore talked to him a massive amount. Status Quo was like his original frontline speaker. So that's not. I mean, these are. Yeah, you guys were part of the conversation, but you weren't like their headliners. You weren't their champions for fucking sure.
On the vote tally.
I was kind of freaking out.
Yeah, she was like, oh my god, they're gonna win. Oh my god, this is amazing. But when we had Christian Smalls on our podcast, one of the things he told us, and look, this was heartbreaking. I wish this wasn't the case, but it is. It's what happened. He had went to, when they were having the protest about the eviction moratorium. Remember, the eviction moratorium was lifted, and so Cori Bush was like sleeping outside to protest that. Remember that?
Yep.
Christian Smalls went to D.C. to meet not only with Cori Bush to stand in solidarity on this issue, but also whoever else was showing up where Cori Bush was. And a bunch of squad members showed up there to show their support. And so Christian Smalls met them. He had conversations with various squad members. I think it was AOC in particular who we talked to. And AOC told him in no uncertain terms, oh, you're the Amazon labor union guy. Oh my God, that's awesome. I support you. I'm going to come. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to show up there. And, they exchanged the staff, AOC staffers exchanged numbers with him, and he was in contact with them on a regular basis. And then what happened was, at the last minute, she pulled out of it. And Christian Smalls really didn't like that because not only did she pull out of it, her office started ghosting Christian Smalls too.
Jesus,
So
fucking
now,
bitch.
Crystal, you had an interesting theory about that.
So that's, you can. I think I don't love these guys now, but when they're right on something, you have to go with it, right? Like, that's how I feel. Like, you can't cancel people. I want to cancel these two. I want to never, like, I never want to listen to these two again. I would love to cancel these two, but I'm not gonna. I'm gonna listen to them still. I'm gonna be annoyed when they're wrong. I'm gonna be annoyed when their elitist bubble makes me mad. I'm gonna be annoyed when they're tone deaf or whatever. But they're right here, so let's give them credit when credit's due.
About how you think it's possible that maybe some of the more established unions told AOC and others, like, hey, look, don't associate with these people because what they're trying is a joke. It's never going to work. And you don't want them to, like, sully your name. Like, if you endorse them and then this thing goes under, then it's like, you take the heat for it or whatever, right? Wasn't that what your theory was?
I mean, I don't want to speculate too much because the truth is I don't know. All I know is she said she was going to show up. The last minute she cancels. She claimed it was her, this is all communication from her staff, claimed it was a security concern. 2 weeks later, she's at the Met Gala. Or several weeks later. I think Christian said 2, but it was a short time frame later, she's at the Met Gala. And even worse than that, okay, like, all right, she's a very busy person. There have been threats on her life. There's no doubt that that stuff is true. She didn't even tweet out support in the final weeks.
So now let's get to that. Let's get to that. So yesterday, you see, Krystal, as you're following this Amazon labor union election like a hawk, you see AOC tweets out some shit, like responding about being oh so happy about this thing winning, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, I know from behind the scenes because, this wasn't, you didn't say anything publicly yet at the time, but the second you saw that, you fucking snapped. You're like, you had the fucking opportunity to show up there, and you ghosted him. And not only that, like you said, you didn't even say some shit in support of it when they were actually needing your help massively. Now that you see they're about to win, all of a sudden you want to jump in front of the fucking parade. Now that shit is obnoxious. It's obnoxious. It's obnoxious. Look, if she wants to come out now and say, no, but seriously, I do support them, okay. But at least own up to the shit where you let them down. Like, at least own up on that front. And if you want to make amends for that by saying, you know what, the next event that you guys have, I'm going to be there, and I'm going to bring all these other politicians. That's great. But there was no owning up to it. So anyway, you saw that, you snapped, you immediately were like, no, I'm not going to, I have to say something in response, because it's disingenuous. That's the problem. It's disingenuous. So you responded and walk everybody through what you said and what happened.
Yeah, I just wanted there to be a record under her little, happy tweet about yay, go Amazon Labor Union. I just wanted there to be a record of where you actually were when it counted, which was nowhere. So I responded with, a link to the interview that Kyle and I did with Christian, where he explained everything that happened. And I said, when it really counted, you left them high and dry and couldn't be bothered to say anything until they were on the cusp of victory. And by the way, these are your constituents.
Now she tried to get you on some snippy shit with that. Like, actually, this isn't in my district.
This is which is really obnoxious, because I didn't say the warehouse is in her district. I know it's not in her district, but I also knew that Christian, part of why he was, legitimately upset about it is because he knows these workers who live in her district who were excited about AOC coming to their rally, and then she lets them down. So for her to pretend like she didn't even represent anyone that worked there was just, really extremely disingenuous. So her reply was, maybe you should look at I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, maybe you should look at a map. This warehouse isn't even my district, and you need to do your due diligence before you reply next time.
Right here,
next one. Yeah, so that was her reply, which is obviously setting up a straw man, because I never even said the warehouse was in the district. The point was that she represents people who work there, and that's just an undeniable fact.
So look, the reason why you're not pointing
sorry, there we go.
Putting it over here. So look, the reason why this matters is because
this is still such a fucking cringe way to respond. These guys both have like studios in their homes. They could do this very properly. They could do it professionally. But they're choosing to do it like this so they can, I don't know, get away with more. I don't know why they're doing it like this. This is a weird way to go about this video. It's as cringe as you could possibly pull off. There's so many ways to do this, and they did it the weirdest way.
She's trying to cover up the fact that she wasn't there when
Yeah.
it counted. Okay,
And
now,
she
again,
knows that, which is why she had such a snippy response, because
right,
it struck a
and
nerve.
that's the main point, is that the reason why she so angrily responded to Krystal is because Krystal touched a nerve, because she's fucking right about it. She's right about it. And again, so if AOC has a problem with any of this, don't take it up with us. Take it up with Christian Smalls, who is the one who said you left him high and dry. Okay, so you don't have a problem with Kyle Klinsky. You don't have a problem with Krystal Ball. When you responded with that tweet, you had the interview in the tweet, and everybody could see with their own two eyes what Christian Smalls said, and he's the one who earned this victory. And so, if you have a problem, then take it up with Christian Smalls. But the fact of the matter is, listen. So now let's get to where we're at this current moment.
Can I say one more thing about
Sure,
that?
of course, go ahead.
Christian also weighed into this debate after she basically tried to make it seem like she didn't represent anyone who had anything to do with this warehouse, and I think that is hurtful to him and to the people that he knows. So he replied just saying, "That's terrible. I personally know people who commute from your district to the Staten Island warehouse." And look, I also think it's noteworthy. She was happy to go back and forth with me a few more times and other media types, but she never responded, at least at this point, to Christian and what he was saying. And that's the person, that's who this is really about. It's about these workers. It's about Christian. It's about the fact that on what is the most potentially transformational labor fight that's happening right next door to you with your own constituents involved, you, for whatever reason,
Jesus.
you weren't there. And yeah, I think
Just
the
go to the
the
fucking
most
studio and
important
do it.
thing is what's happening on the ground and the incredible victory they look like they're on the cusp of pulling off. But it absolutely matters who was there, who had their back, and who was a true ally in this fight. I think it's a very revealing moment, in fact, and not just for AOC, but for everyone who claims to be supporter of workers and supporter of unions. When the chips were down and it really mattered, and you have this guy doing this extraordinarily courageous and historic thing, where were you and what'd you have to say about it?
And look, he was a long shot, which is why she was probably coached, hey, might not be the best idea to do this, but you know who else was a long shot? AOC. You were a long shot. And so you realized you were doing something, oh my God, this is so hard, I might not win, and very few people were there for you when you first started, and you can remember that and be like, well, so is this really about solidarity? Is this really about making change for positive stuff? Or is it are you safely calculating? And that's the main argument against what you're doing here. Stop safely calculating and actually lead with heart and lead with principle. And realize, hey, even if it goes up in smoke, at least I was there to try to do the right thing. But look, to end this all, I want to end it on a more positive note, because this isn't fucking personal. Who gives a fuck about Kyle Klinsky or Krystal Ball or AOC or our PCs? I don't care, neither should you. What matters is, okay, what are you going to do now? So do you want to make amends? Do you want to, go talk to Christian Smalls? Go show up to the next event. Do whatever you can. If they want help organizing other, Amazon factories or whatever, regardless of where it is, maybe, you make up for it and show that you're the real deal and you mean business by just doing the next thing.
Well,
look, that's all we're saying, is
and,
that show up when it matters.
That time is right now, because there is another Amazon facility in New York that is voting in the month of April. So another critical election is coming up right now. So make it better. Show up for them. Help them. Be a part of making it not just this one warehouse, but a start of a national trend. And also, if you don't mind me making this pitch, Kyle, if you guys can support the Amazon Labor Union, if you're able, there is not a more worthy or more impactful cause. These guys are doing it all on their own. Very little in the way of resources. This is a truly, truly worker-led grassroots movement. They're doing the work. They have another vital election coming up. So if you're able to support them,
I agree with that. Support anybody that's trying to fight the man, especially the Jeff Bezos man. Some of that though is kind of, I don't know. I just don't like the way the two of them did that. They could have done it more professional or more studio. I just, this weird video in their fucking car with I don't know, going back and forth between the two of them. Her face right there makes kind of the face I feel about the way they did this, the way they came about it. It's just weird. I think it's a little weird the way they went about it. but they did it. They went through it. Whatever. I had this clip from the David Pakman show. I have not watched it, but the whole Disney thing runs a red flag for me at the moment.
I don't think that the future that the Disney
mostly because Disney just got hit like 3 weeks ago. 100 people got arrested for a human trafficking ring, and this happens about every single year at Disney. Disney is the sex trafficking little haven of the world, both LA and Orlando. So that's something that drives me nuts about Disney. This whole Disney making your kids gay is just, I mean, I think it's obviously just bullshit, but they do have, you know, people who abduct you, so maybe that's something we could talk about. But we don't talk about the things that actually happen. We talk about the things they want us to talk about. We stay within their Overton window. We don't see anything outside of that window, and if we stay within inside the window, we might not get deleted. Whatever. I'm doing this for the fun of it, not for a long time. If I get deleted, it happens. Hi, buddy. All right, I got to give him some water. I got to give him a calm the fuck down treat because he is not calm. All right. David Pakman.
Trying to
Not
make
me, David
children
Pakman. Not my
gay.
opinions.
You might say, David, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Even the concept, aside from Disney, how do you make someone gay? And I would say to you, yeah, I know, it doesn't make any sense. This is the new cultural flashpoint of the week on right-wing media. Fox Business and others are, I guess, trying to start moral panic by arguing that a recent leaked video from an internal Disney conference call of sorts, meeting of sorts, is evidence that Disney is actively trying to make kids gay or LGBTQ. Fox Business with the report, Disney exposed leaked videos, show officials. You have to do the Alex Jones voice when you read something like this. Leaked videos show officials pushing LGBT agenda, saying DeSantis wants to erase gay kids. Charlie Kirk, right-wing individual. Charlie Kirk claims Disney is trying to make your children gay. Why else would you want to have two dudes or two women kissing in a Disney film?
He should be good for a while.
What is this all related to? This all relates to a video from a Disney all-hands meeting about the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. And in this meeting, executive producer LaToya Raveneau says that her team has implemented a not at all secret gay agenda. Now, you've got to listen to the video to actually understand what she's talking about. So let's do that. This is the source of the moral panic about Disney is trying to make your kids gay.
Like, I love Disney's content. I grew up watching, you know, all of the classics. They have been a huge, like, informative.
Of course, you're talking about the live action, I'm guessing, Chinese. I mean, that was, I'm assuming the Mulan live action movie, which I apologize if I don't know Disney that well. I am not as into it as some people are, including the person sitting right over here sleeping. But I do apologize. Yeah, that's one of her favorite movies. So I hear that one all the time. I had to assume that there's a new live action, and I'm assuming that she is not watching that with me because she would be disappointed by it.
Part of my life, but at the same time, like, I work.
But yeah, Disney is a freaking sex trafficking haven. Like, child abductions and human abductions happen at Disney in the Orlando area. People coming in, international people. It's just it's a really bad situation in LA and in Orlando.
Worked at small studios most of my career, and I'd heard, you know, you hear whispers.
And I live in Florida,
like, I'd
so.
heard things like, oh, you know, they won't let you show this at a Disney show, and I'm like, okay. So I was a little like sus when I started, but then my experience was bafflingly the opposite of what I had heard. On my little pocket of, like, Proud Family Disney TVA, the showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and like our leadership over there has been so welcoming to like my like not at all secret gay agenda. And so like
How dare she? But what does she actually mean?
I feel like I felt like it was, I mean, like maybe it was that way in the past, but I guess like something must have happened in the last, like they're turning it around, they're going hard. And then all that like momentum that I felt, like that sense of, I don't have to be afraid to like, let's have these two characters kiss. Let's in the background, like I was just, wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to like, if you see anything queer in the show, I'm proud of them. But like,
Okay, so you could be like, whoa, that's a really weird way of explaining what you're doing. That's very strange. But it's abundantly clear that she's not talking about making people gay. What she's talking about is she has an agenda to show LGBTQ characters represented in Disney stuff. It's not like that big of a deal. Even
No, it's not people spending money to grab kids. It's literally people, it's the people who get arrested are usually employees of the parks, of the hotels, of the restaurants. It's usually employees that get busted, and they help human traffickers separate kids and then abduct them. I guess I don't know how it works. I just know that when I researched it, I saw there's a sheriff in Orlando that about every single year you see a video of him, and he's got somewhere between 80 and 120 people that he is arresting for human trafficking violations or just human trafficking, different degrees of it obviously, and I don't, but yeah, every year Orlando has one, and it's kind of known as a thing in just Disney parks because it's international place. People come and it's massive amounts of people, so people get separated. They do the same thing in like big venues too. They try to get people that are separated, that are drunk at like big concerts.
many sort of like centrist companies recognize that, hey, in like commercials maybe or wherever, in the same way that at one point it became very en vogue to show like interracial couples or just non-white parents in commercials. We 10, 12 years ago, that was a big thing. The same thing is now being done.
I'm pretty sure it's them, sneaking their people in or whatever, because those are low-level jobs. These are minimum wage, not basically minimum wage jobs with medium security, medium care for people the managers who are hiring them. So it's they're these trafficking gangs or whatever. They sneak people into these minimum wage jobs. I'm assuming that's how it would work.
To be more representative when it comes to content like on Disney. And the idea that this is them trying to make kids gay is just the latest version of moral panic. Here's the Charlie Kirk clip. Listen to how he interprets this.
I know I keep resorting back to it, but Christopher Caldwell really depicted the danger of having out of control liberation movements that are not anchored in legitimate grievance. Christopher Caldwell in the book Age of Entitlement warned us that the trajectory that we are on is the very groups that allegedly want liberation will soon become the tyrants themselves. In fact, it will happen almost immediately, almost overnight. That once the groups are formed, it's not like all of a sudden the ACLU and the LGBT groups like disassemble, like, oh, we got gay marriage done, now we can just put our paperwork away. No, it's an entire cottage industry of outrage and hysteria. It gave them meaning and purpose. Yeah. And so now that's not about making gay marriage legal. It's legal in every single state. That was always their big fight. No, now it's about making your kids gay. Why else would you want to have two dudes or two women kissing in a Disney film?
Maybe because that exists in the real world and you want to be representative of the real world, Charlie?
The agenda, to expose them to it or to increase the ranks of the LGBTQ community? What is the process?
Increase the ranks?
People.
What the fuck does that even mean? Increase the ranks? Seriously, what the fuck does that even mean? increase the ranks of the... Okay. Well, this is freaking Friday night. There are probably protests somewhere on Saturday for the Don't Say Gay bill. There's one in Tampa on Sunday that I plan on going to. I'm going to try to live stream it best I can. We'll see how the reception is. Last time I was in downtown Tampa with that many people. The towers in Tampa don't cover that kind of streaming power, but we'll see how it goes. This is just, I live in Florida, so I'm the Don't Say Gay, the anti-gay, whatever fucking you want to call it, it's a bullshit bill made up for a bullshit problem, and right-wingers are now using it to mudsling, and I fucking hate it. I really do hate it. Yeah. And in Florida, the right-wing asshole DeSantis made it legal to hit protesters with your car if they're even slightly on the road. You can just drill them with your car. So when I start seeing the anti-protesters when I go to Tampa, just might bump one with my car, make that law a little more close to home for the right-wingers. Because the right-wingers are all for, yeah, let's hit protesters with our car. And then a couple months later, they're out there with their no mask, no vaccine, no mask, no vaccine. I'm not a sheep. And, you know, I could hit them with my car if I wanted to, but I was too busy trying to go to work, trying to make money, because I don't have time to be out there protesting on a random-ass day like that. I don't have the luxury like they did. So, yeah, I see this in Florida. I'm going to try to go to the one in Florida. The fucking Disney's trying to make people gay. Fucking right-wingers, man. Come on. Just... It's a dead subject. Just let it... I don't know how it's still a divisive issue, and I don't know why they're trying to make this a thing. Like, Disney's not trying to turn...
Were gay before this sort of nonsense was happening, so why exactly are you doing this?
And of course, the answer is so simple that it's just to represent the way the real world is. Don't they get the idea is we're just going to represent that in the world there's different types of people. It's sort of like, I mean, apply it. We were doing fine when every actor was white, and in order to have a black character, a white actor would use blackface. That was fine. Why did we need to bring in black actors? Well, because there's black people in the real world, right? I mean, isn't it sort of obvious? And the idea of making people gay is, of course, absurd, and you all will understand that. There is nothing I could say to my gay friends to make them no longer gay. And in fact, when gay people see movies in which heterosexual couples kiss, it doesn't make them heterosexual, okay? And similarly, there's nothing anyone could say to me or show me a video of that would then make me gay. I mean, it's a ridiculous commentary. It's an absurd commentary.
Wasn't the next thing, it was gay frogs, now gay children. What's next? Isn't the next thing sex with ducks? That was Garfunkel and Oates' great song. They made fun of the Republican senator that said, if you make gay marriage legal, the next thing you're gonna have is sex with ducks. I fucking hate those arguments. It's such an uneducated way to argue an issue from educated people, and it's like, you know that your argument is invalid and with no merit, nothing to it. Marriage is not an institution of the church, because the church is not the only religion that had marriage. Marriage was invented before church, before any of our associated religions. Any religion you can think of right now, the institution of marriage was before it. So yeah, it's gaslighting, really, right? I mean, it's just bullshit. All right.
Commentary. The funniest clip I saw on this was from Newsmax, where a Newsmax host said, you know, movies are just about people. Why do they have to be about LGBT people? Well, that's exactly why, because LGBT people exist in the world and they're people too. It's very, very strange, the level of reflexive homophobia that comes out.
I don't get this be your whole self routine at work or even in art, even in products that you are creating for other people to consume. For instance, take me. I love model trains. Did you know that? I
Okay.
actually do. These guys, they've got a great train set. I've admired it. I've helped. I love trains. I love them. I don't talk about it on TV because it's a pretty niche hobby, and not a lot of people are into it, all right? Especially at my age.
Being gay isn't a hobby, by the way. I don't know. I mean, this is really crazy.
That's my thing. I'll do it on my time, and I'm not going to bother.
I don't love agreeing with David Pakman this whole time, but sometimes you can agree with somebody on an issue completely and sincerely. And I am bothered by these jackasses' coverage of this. So good job, David Pakman. I usually try to show him when I'm agreeing with him, because when I don't agree with him, I get too upset. So I show him when I agree usually. That's the best. Show them in their good light, right? Because I do not agree with him all the time.
You about it. Fair? You get it? I think that's a pretty good analogy.
This is sick. It's not a good analogy. It's not a good analogy.
Then there's this.
The showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and like our leadership over there has been so welcoming to like my like not at all secret gay agenda. I don't have to be afraid to like, let's have these two characters kiss. Let's in the background like I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to like if you see anything queer in the show, I'm proud of it. But like I just was like, no one would stop me and no one was trying to stop me.
Just have fun with your not-so-secret gay agenda and queerness and putting it in movies and cartoons. And where has it been so far? I watch this stuff from time to time, I guess, over the years. These are...
Have they turned you? You watch this stuff from time to time over the years? So has Disney turned you, you fucking ignorant prick? I've watched these movies. Am I secretly a little gay now? I don't know. Have they turned me? How would I know? I'm not sure. I don't know when the propaganda has worked. Idiots. Just idiots, man. How do those people make deca millions? Like, they make 10 to 20 million a year to spout that kind of bullshit. And yet, there's millions of people that don't make enough money to pay the rent. How is this a thing? I love capitalism. It's fantastic. I love it.
Movies you've heard of, I've heard of. Is this what they've been up to all along? Is this what they will be up to from now on? I don't think it's going to help the plot line. You know, movies are about people. Why do they have to be about LGBTQ people or anything like, is the orientation really all that?
Well, LGBTQ people exist in the world, so you would expect to see them in the movies. A very difficult concept, and this is the latest moral panic. It's BS. Be aware of it. It's not going to stop anytime soon.
One of our sponsors is called Privacy.
Ugh.
Privacy is a total...
Alright, I don't watch people's fucking ads. I don't support shit. I don't get paid. I just try to throw some good clips together to give a more rounded view of things. With that being said, I wanted a few more clips before.
But I'm glad you brought up the issue of U.S. hegemony.
Today. This is Breakthrough News. Subscribed, of course, I am. Breakthrough News does some great stuff. They have Rania Kalik. She used to be on RT as well. She has done a lot since, and she was doing a lot when she was on it. So.
Because we want to turn to the issue of Latin America, where, of course, U.S. hegemony has been massively challenged since Hugo Chavez's election in 1998 in Venezuela. But, of course, Colombia, the Israel of Latin America, has remained as the cornerstone of these hard-right, neoliberal, racist politics in Latin America. But perhaps things could be headed for a change in Colombia, and we are very happy to be joined yet again by friend of the show, fantastic journalist, co-editor of People's Dispatch, Zoe Alexandra. Welcome, Zoe.
Great to be back here, as always.
Well, you know, the pleasure is all ours, if you will.
Eugene.
You know,
I don't really get that joke, to be honest.
I'm going to keep making it. I don't care, all right? It is a pleasure.
I'll fill you in. I'll fill you in.
A lot happening in Colombia, of course. let me not assume that people know. Maybe let's start here. You know, obviously there's primary-ish elections. We're now in the official campaign for elections for president, but there's, I think, other activity going on. Give us just a sense of what the political scene is like there and when these next elections are and what people should be looking for.
Definitely. So 2 weeks back, the first round of the kind of electoral process in Colombia was held, legislative elections and the primary elections for the different political coalitions. And so in this, people were able to vote for who's going to represent them in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, and also who they wanted for, within each coalition, who would be the presidential and vice presidential candidates. This also kind of serves as a litmus test of how much support that these coalitions have. Many people drop out after this first round as presidential candidates, seeing if they don't have enough votes. They join to other coalitions, so it's a really important moment. And in this first electoral phase, a surprising new, well, not really surprising, but a new electoral force was one of kind of the stars of this day, which is the Historical Pact. This is a progressive alliance, a coalition of many different parties in Colombia, led by now presidential candidate Gustavo Petro. He is a longtime political activist in Colombia. He was active with the 19M movement, which was an armed movement in Colombia in the urban centers. He then, with the transition, with the demobilization of this group, he entered institutional politics, was active in the legislative realm. He was the mayor of Bogota. He's been a senator for the last several years, and he really has galvanized left forces and progressive forces in Colombia that have long been divided, that have long been, suffering campaigns of persecution. Gustavo Petro has emerged as the front runner, and in this primary election, he, received millions of votes. He's going to be the presidential candidate of the Historic Pact, and the Historic Pact not only got a large number of seats in the Senate, in the Congress, but also had a really strong showing in these primary elections, and it looks like they are, leading the voter intention and voter support for the upcoming presidential elections, the first round, which will be held in May. And if one candidate does not get over 50% of the votes, they will go to a second round in June, and then it will be between the top two candidates.
Mm-hmm. Well, one other notable aspect, that I just want to get to here that I was hoping you could speak to about the primary is the emergence of Francia Marquez as the running mate of Petro, which is also quite historic.
Yeah, Francia Marquez was the second runner-up in this internal primary of the Historic Pact. She is an Afro-Colombian land defender, activist, human rights defender, an incredible person who's really been in the struggle for decades. She comes from a region of Colombia that's one of the most affected by violence, Cauca. She was really active in her community in resisting an illegal mining project. She walked all the way from her town in Cauca to Bogota, demanding that the authorities take action for the destruction that was happening of her community, the assassination of people in her community. She has long been, active in Colombia's diverse and plural social movements, and she's really emerged as kind of the representation of these movements that have so long been shut out of institutional politics, that have been annihilated, assassinated, repressed, persecuted, and it's giving a lot of incredible energy, really. I mean, people that have been so sidelined, historically for decades, for centuries, really, Afro-Colombian communities that have been so oppressed and so marginalized, and to see that a woman like Francia Marquez, who comes from Cauca, who's an Afro-Colombian woman who fights for the rights of Afro-descendant communities in Colombia and across the continent, is now the front runner in these presidential elections, is incredibly historic. I mean, the Historic Pact, in its name, it's not a lie, it is historic. It's bringing together so many sections of the left, so many sections of Colombia's movements, of the society, and it really stands a strong chance in these upcoming elections.
Zoe, in Colombia is this country that is so deeply connected to the U.S. in terms of its security apparatus. I mean, even more than that, but the U.S. basically trains its armed forces, its police, which are known to be incredibly violent. There's a lot of killings of activists that we hear about taking place in Colombia on a regular basis. So I'm just curious, in terms of the safety of these people, is there a danger in the kinds of rise of these figures in a place like Colombia, where we do see a lot of violence, not just, of course, like the killings of activists, but also, we saw there was an uprising in Colombia not too long ago, and the reaction to that uprising was quite violent. So what could be the backlash to figures like this gaining ground in a place like Colombia?
Right. I mean, already we've seen it. So Francia Marquez was only confirmed as the vice presidential candidate, in the past week. And since then, there has been an onslaught of threats against her. She's received several death threats. And, this is not new for her. I mean, essentially, if you enter into activism in Colombia, you almost expect to get death threats. And especially if you are a prominent voice, she's received several from the the group Águilas Negras, which in recent years has been kind of ubiquitous.
Colombia is the second most aided country from America in the world after Israel. We give them the most aid, financial, weapons, number two, big old fat number two. So that's disturbing.
Anytime there's a movement, an uprising, the Águilas Negras will release a statement threatening, many prominent people of death. She's received horrific, slandering campaigns on social media, in actually mainstream media, Colombian media, racist statements, horrible things. And I think people are really worried about their safety. She's personally asked President Ivan Duque that he has to take action to ensure her safety. I mean, right now, the fact that on Twitter it's almost trending the hashtag "Don't Kill Petro" really speaks to the fact that there's a real danger here. I mean, there is precedent for this. The member of M19 who was going to run for president after the demobilization was assassinated. He was the presidential candidate, Carlos Pizarro Leon Gomez. He was very popular. He was coming out of this demobilized guerrilla group, and he was assassinated. There's a lot of precedent for this happening in Colombia. That being said, of course, this is not the 1990s anymore. It would be, really, hopefully this is not something that will happen. Hopefully Ivan Duque will actually take measures to ensure their safety. They, of course, have many different security frameworks, but I think the fact that this is even happening, the fact that presidential candidate, vice presidential candidate is under such threats is really concerning and speaks to the fact that being a social leader, being a human rights defender in a country like Colombia means that your life is constantly in danger, and not just from online trolls, but people who actually could come to your house and kill you, like has happened to so many people in Colombia.
Mm-hmm. Most trade unionists killed of any country on earth regularly, year after year. Well, I think this is a good sort of segue into, I think, an important issue is, were Petro and Marquez able to be successful? What are some of their policies around certainly the peace process, but what are some of the other things that they're proposing, and what would that mean for the nation of Colombia?
So, as Colombia being Latin America's Israel, it has, not only is it dangerous to be an activist, but the whole setup of society is really...
See? I wasn't kidding. The experts say it too. I just happen to watch a lot on the two subjects, so.
Made in order to favor the elites and exclude the majorities. So, for example, access to healthcare is extremely challenging in Colombia. There was a law passed during the presidency of Álvaro Uribe Vélez, which essentially privatized many of the health services. So millions are left without healthcare. There's a famous kind of like urban legend of people dying in the doors of the hospital because they're unable to get healthcare. So one major point of their platform is ensuring healthcare, nationalizing healthcare. Access to education. So when Petro was mayor of Bogota, one of the principal axes of his time as mayor was, democratizing access to education. He worked a lot with the homeless communities in Bogota. He worked a lot with these marginalized communities. People had not been able to have access to education, and ensuring they were able to enroll in adult education programs. And in Colombia, again, the higher education is extremely expensive. It's extremely inaccessible. People are now forced to take out huge loans or try to get lucky enough to get some insane scholarship. But democratizing access to education, housing, of course, is another huge issue. So all of these essential rights are key tenets of the platform. And then, even looking at the energy sector, Colombia is, like its neighbor Venezuela, a huge exporter of oil. It has vast reserves of oil, and this has been to its detriment. It's a country that has over 40% of its territory in concessions to mining companies, to oil companies, and none of this wealth, none of this mineral wealth, none of this natural resource wealth has actually benefited the communities. It's a very popular country to invest in and to have mining projects in because of precisely the legal framework that makes these companies able to take out these resources, not pay royalties, not have to have any sort of accountability to the communities. There's so much you could say more about their collusion also with paramilitary groups, but the essential fact that these resources have never benefited the people, have never been put into actually strengthening the state. And so Petro one of his central proposals is moving away from this resource extraction economy and pushing towards agriculture. Colombia is one of the countries with extremely rich soil. You can grow literally anything there. I've seen fruits I've never even seen in my entire life. And so he really wants to focus on this strength of the Colombian economy. There's a major challenge in rural communities is that over the past...
That would be a really good thing for the country. Start exporting some of their exotic fruits. That seems lucrative.
Several decades, because of free trade agreements, because of the violence, because of the drug war, they've been forced to not grow vegetables, fruits, and other things that would sustain their communities and actually have kind of a positive effect, but they've been forced to grow coca crops, they've been forced to grow drugs. And so trying to address both this problem of national economic development and also strengthening of these rural communities that throughout the 6 decades of the Colombian armed conflict have been so marginalized, have been so persecuted, and today continue to face the threats to their survival because of neoliberalism, because of all of these different policies against them.
Mm-hmm. And Zoe, not to make everything about Ukraine, but I think just to kind of go full circle here, I think it would be interesting just to know what is the, you pay attention to like the Colombian media and what people in Colombia are talking about. And Colombia is a very close state to the U.S. That said, it's not like they've taken an extreme position against Russia, as far as I know, in this war on Ukraine. And I'm curious about how that war is playing out, at least in the way it's being discussed in a country like Colombia that is very much aligned with the U.S., but isn't necessarily trying to antagonize Russia as far as I know. Again, I could be very wrong about that.
Well, Colombia is a global partner of NATO, is actually the first of its kind to have this kind of relationship with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And I say the full name because Colombia, of course, is not in the North Atlantic, but it is part of this NATO global expansion. And so I think in the sense that, of course, Colombia doesn't really have that much to send like European countries. They're not going to be having this more direct relationship, but of course they fall in lockstep with the NATO orientations, also by virtue of being a global NATO partner. I think there's a lot of attention right now on the elections, and a lot of the mainstream media coverage right now has really been focused on demonizing Petro. They like to make a lot of loose kind of allegations. So you have here on one hand, Russia, USSR, communist, terrorist, Petro. So a lot of that. There's a lot of these kind of loose word games. But I think, of course, anything that can be weaponized to stigmatize the left, say that the progressive ticket is not a good choice for Colombia is definitely being done. So all those kind of conservative talking heads definitely weaponizing the situation to further their own goals and to say that, Colombia supports Ukraine and someone like Gustavo Petro is in bed with, the USSR, which of course is not factually, accurate at all.
Well, also doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's also the fact that the USSR no longer exists.
It's all everything they can get in there. I'm sure the Castro Chavismo is coming back, but Zoe, it does remind me a little bit of, I guess, every election now, not in America, but, in Mexico in 2018, which was also sort of a major changeover in terms of the traditional politics and sort of a new era. We've seen Chile, obviously, with the recent election there. Perhaps we will see in Brazil the return of former President Lula. I mean, given you were there in Honduras, of course, as well, it's obviously a huge win for the left. I mean, give us a sense of what it would mean for Petro to succeed in Colombia, for the region, and maybe what that means for the world. Well, I'll just leave it there.
Well, I think, starting off first with the most local level, which is what it would mean for Colombia. I mean, even the symbolic victory of Francia Marquez and Gustavo Petro triumphing in the country that has been ruled by the elites and the oligarchs for 60 years. I mean, in Colombia, you never had a Plan Condor coup because the left was never able to gain power, was never able to break this kind of lock that the oligarchies always had on institutional politics in the country. It would be huge. I mean, imagine a country that would have friendly relations with Venezuela, that would not be allowing paramilitaries to train for, magnicides to happen there, for invasions of the neighboring country to happen. We're definitely seeing this progressive wave, this progressive tide. I think we've talked about it before, and this opens up many opportunities for, more interdependence within the region. If Brazil, which is the largest country in Latin America and has over, almost nearly 300 million people, were also to, win a progressive government, I think we're looking at a very different scenario. It's hard to imagine how the U.S. Would respond to this scenario, but I think we've seen in some of the cases that with these, less Venezuela-style governments, these are not victories of socialist parties. These are not victories that are, really, really challenging the structure of capitalism. I mean, Gustavo Petro will say, I am not anti-capitalist. He is not going to challenge the underlying economic structure in a serious way. And so I think, for example, after Xiomara Castro won, instead of contesting her victory, the U.S. knew it was more strategic to try to immediately make friends with her. And, to what extent they've been able to influence Honduran policy to the moment is unclear. I think we're going to see in the coming months and years, like how they're going to reconfigure their response to a region that's, of course, tired of neoliberalism, tired of hardline conservatism, and how will they respond to these progressive governments? I think, Gabriel Boric not inviting Venezuela, not inviting Cuba to his inauguration, I think I'm willing I'm hoping that, Gustavo Petro, Francia Marquez government would be much more friendly, especially I think the element that Francia Marquez is in this coalition is that she's representing the voices of the movements. This is not the same as Boric. This is not the same as other victories, because she really does come from the movement. She's coming from the communities, representing these voices, and that's that will be really, really strong as well.
Nice. All right, guys. Again, that was Breakthrough News. Always doing really good work on Africa, Latin America, Middle East. Doing actual journalism, something to actually watch. Oh, man. Fucking Florida. All right. Fucking Florida. Let us do our Stony Progressive takedown, and then we can move on to Ukraine-Russia freaking history. I'm doing Indiana today. So, taking my second here. So, Indiana, Stony Progressive. His name is Todd Young, Republican. He was first brought in 2016, so he is running for re-election for the first time, meaning if he gets this election, he gets lifetime benefits from our government. In this election, he does not have a primary running against him. He does have one Democrat, Thomas McDermott Jr., and a Libertarian. James Sanek has already won the primary for their Libertarian race. So he does have a Libertarian, he does have a Democrat, got some independents, a couple of independents, Jason Gabehart and Ellen Kizik. But this is what's considered a most win state. When you look at their money, Todd C. Young of the Republican Party, he is at $6.5 million on hand that he's gotten from this. He's already spent $2.5 million, $2.6 million, but that, some of that's from his last campaign. The next, the Democrat has 150,000 so far. 150,000. They're not even trying, okay? And the other guys don't really have any money. So the Democrats aren't really trying here. They're letting them have it. They don't actually care. And they call this a solid Indiana, a solid red state. Indiana, Midwest, Rust Belt, Indiana is a solid red state. This is what Democrats have given up on. This is what independents aren't even fighting for. Kind of sad. Now, the last general election, it was 1 million votes to 1.1 million votes. 50 to 45. 50 to 45. Why aren't we trying? Why isn't somebody trying? It's only 1 million votes. No independents have any money. No freaking Democrats have any money. Just a Republican. All right, let's take a look at Mr. Nobody running against, Todd Young. Oh, Todd Young, he's been in Congress for a little while, and he's worth a negative $1.4 million. Man, he must have had a rough job before he got into Congress, huh? Must have had a real rough job. Negative $1.4 million. All that debt. Poor guy. Although he did have a little bit of money in 2015, he got up to a millionaire, almost to be a millionaire, and then he lost it all somehow. Being in Congress, he just lost all his money. That was never happened ever before. So that's a red flag to me. That's a massive red flag. And then when we look at how much money he's raised in these past 13 years of being in campaigns, 13 years, he's got 26 million, which he spent 20.5 million. So he's not exactly unfinanced. $26 million over 2 different separate elections. That's pretty impressive. So this guy who's in massive debt can't seem to make a dollar. He's just broke. He's just this broke senator. Where's he getting his money? From the Volstein PAC. That's a pretty powerful PAC. Barnes and Thornburg, a law firm. Blue Cross and Blue Shield and DaVita Inc. Both healthcare productions. So he's getting a lot of money from healthcare and some PAC money and some lawyer money. Not exactly, and not a small amount. Pretty a lot, 26 million. That's not nothing. Always got to dig into those deeper contributors, those big contributors amongst his career. So, like we said, DaVita and Heritage, Amway, Club for Growth. That's a big time billionaire pact for the right wing. Capital Group, twice they had to split it up. That's not iffy at all, huh? So he has the big money. He's somehow just worth. He's somehow only worth negative $1 million. That's always so shady. Here's 6 minutes of him chatting
Community
on.
foundations. We take great pride in our community foundations in the state of Indiana. And Dr. Osley, as you know, beginning in 1990, the Lilly Endowment began an initiative known as GIFT, or Giving Indiana Funds for Tomorrow. This is a way to help establish and strengthen community foundations across the state of Indiana. When GIFT began, there were fewer than 12 community foundations, and today there are 94 community foundations. We have 92 counties, so of course that's more than one per county. Indiana is the only state in the country with a community foundation in every single county, and we have the country's highest concentration of community foundations. Dr. Osley, how does this structure, the only state in the country with a community foundation in every single county, enable our state to better serve local communities?
Thank you, Senator Young, for your leadership. Indiana is unique. We have, as you've noted, a community foundation in every single county, probably the highest concentration of any state in the country.
Dr. Osley, because it begs the question, since we're in Washington, D.C., and I know my colleagues and their staff are watching attentively, are there major barriers that you might speak to establishing more community foundations around the country? Well, thank you, Doctor, and I'll be submitting for the record some questions to the other witnesses if you have thoughts on barriers that we can eliminate to ensure there's greater uptake in community foundations, and you can learn from what I will take some liberties and call the Indiana model. That would be fantastic. So in my remaining bit of time here, Dr. Osley, I would like to highlight just a column you wrote recently for the Indianapolis Business Journal. You stated that the pace of technological innovation in the philanthropic sector is increasing, and it's going to need to accelerate this year and in future years. We've had some real notable examples where Central Indiana Community Foundation has partnered with an Indianapolis-based tech company selflessly and met with some success in ensuring that companies have the tools to track and manage their charitable giving. In short, Dr. Osley, I'll again submit some questions to you to ask in greater detail about this topic, but why is it so important for organizations in the charitable giving space to embrace technological innovation?
Excellent question, Senator Young. Just to put this in perspective, online giving, as we've noted, grew by double digits over the last year. And today, online giving accounts for 10% of charitable giving overall, its highest ever on record. What this means is nonprofits have had to shift a lot of their engagement, service delivery, and even just their day-to-day operations online. And many nonprofits were not in a position to do so, did not have the resources or the capability. When we look at workplace giving, a very important channel, about $6 billion is given through workplace giving. companies also face this challenge because in the past, workplace giving was done in person. They had to shift this online.
That was the supposed negative $1.4 million, just broke as can be senator, who has, like I said, raised like $10 million per election that he's run for, which is stupid big money, from mostly healthcare companies, lawyer companies, and Republican super PACs. That's our poor senator, poor senator, Mr. Super PAC there. So I don't believe him. I don't trust him. My personal opinion. Not that Indiana has much else to go for. And again, this freaking election is just showing that how shitty our system is. Todd Young doesn't even have a freaking opponent, really. It's kind of pathetic. So that was that part of the show. All right. Well, the last thing I want to do is the Ukrainian roundtable, Ukrainian-Russian histories, relations, and such. But these are people that have been censored on Twitter and YouTube. So I can't show them on YouTube. So good night, YouTube. Come on over to Twitch, hang out for the next hour with our Russian-Ukraine discussion. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow night at midnight-ish. But I am going to do more and more segments that YouTube will not let me do. So this one is one that YouTube I can't. So I'm out of YouTube, going over to Twitch, and we'll hang out for another hour, hour and a half. So peace